poor Filipino boy's soulful singing shakes the stage, glowing star loudly crying. The lights were bright, but the stage felt like a mountain he had been climbing his whole life. The young boy, barefoot in his worn-out slippers, clutched the microphone with trembling hands. His shirt was a size too big, faded from years of washing, and his small frame seemed swallowed by it. Yet, when he opened his mouth to sing, the entire hall froze. The first note came out shaky, but then his voice poured out like a river of pain, hope, and dreams all woven together. Within seconds, the audience was no longer watching just another audition. They were witnessing the soul of a boy who had carried the weight of poverty, hardship, and love for his family into every single word. His name was Miguel, a 12-year-old boy from a small fishing village in the Philippines. Life had never been easy for him. His father worked tirelessly as a fisherman, sometimes returning home with nothing but disappointment in his eyes after days without a good catch. His mother, frail but strong-hearted, sold vegetables in the local market just to keep food on the table. Miguel was the eldest of 3 siblings, and though still a child himself, he often took on the role of caretaker, watching over his younger brother and sister whenever his parents worked. Their house was little more than a patchwork of wood and rusted metal sheets, where the rain dripped through holes in the roof during storms, and the wind whistled through the cracks at night. But amidst all the struggles, Miguel found one thing that gave him peace: singing. His voice became his escape, his prayer, his way of telling the world what his heart carried when words were not enough. Every night, after finishing his chores, Miguel would sit on the old bamboo bench outside their house and sing softly to the stars. He sang songs he learned from the radio at the market, from neighbors who hummed old Filipino ballads, and even from church hymns that echoed in his memory. His siblings would fall asleep to the sound of his voice, as if his songs could erase the hunger they felt in their stomachs. But Miguel's dream went beyond just singing under the night sky. He dreamed of standing on a real stage, of singing into a microphone that wasn't broken, of proving that even a poor boy from a forgotten village could make people feel something through music. Still, dreams like his often felt too big, too impossible. One day, an announcement shook their little town. A popular national talent competition would be holding auditions in the nearby city. For many, it was just another show, but for Miguel, it was a chance to turn his dream into reality. The problem was, they had no money for bus fare, let alone the proper clothes to wear for an audition. His mother worried, telling him gently that maybe the timing wasn't right. His father, quiet as always, looked at him with tired eyes and said, "If this is your dream, Anik, you must fight for it. I'll find a way." True to his word, Miguel's father went out to sea earlier than usual, fighting the waves day after day. His mother stayed longer at the market, even under the scorching sun. Neighbors, who had often heard Miguel's voice at church gatherings, pitched in with small coins, each one telling him to chase his dream because his voice carried something special. Slowly, they gathered just enough for the bus ride. On the day of the audition, Miguel wore his only clean white shirt and old pants that had been mended too many times. His heart raced as he and his mother boarded the bus, the city lights growing brighter with every mile they traveled. It was his first time leaving the village, and the noise, the tall buildings, the endless cars, it was overwhelming. Yet, deep inside, his dream burned brighter than fear. At the audition venue, children lined up in expensive clothes, their families carrying bags of food and water to last the day. Some looked at Miguel with pity, others with curiosity. He clutched his mother's hand tightly, feeling small among the crowd. Hours passed before his number was finally called. When he stepped onto the stage, the judges barely looked at him. One raised an eyebrow at his simple clothes. Another flipped through the audition sheet without much interest. Miguel's hands shook as he held the microphone, and for a second, he thought about running off the stage. But then, he remembered his father's rough hands pulling nets from the sea, his mother's tired smile at the market, his siblings waiting at home. He remembered singing under the stars, where no one judged him but the universe itself. So, he closed his eyes and began to sing. The first verse carried his fears, the chorus carried his pain, and by the time he reached the high notes, the entire room felt the weight of his soul. His voice wasn't perfect, but it was raw, powerful, and filled with truth. The judges leaned forward, their expressions changing from disinterest to awe. Some audience members wiped their tears, stunned that such a voice could come from such a boy. When the final note echoed into silence, there was a pause, a heartbeat of stillness, and then, thunderous applause. The audience stood to their feet, clapping and cheering, their voices rising like a wave. Miguel, breathing heavily, opened his eyes and saw the judges smiling, one of them even pressing the golden buzzer that showered the stage in confetti. His mother wept uncontrollably in the corner, her hands pressed against her mouth. That moment changed everything. Miguel's audition went viral, spreading across social media, touching millions of hearts not just in the Philippines but around the world. People saw not just a poor boy, but a dreamer, a fighter, someone who turned pain into music. Offers poured in, opportunities he never imagined possible. But with the new path came challenges too. Some people criticized him, saying he didn't deserve the fame, that he was just lucky. Others tried to use him for their own gain, offering contracts that would take more than they gave. Through it all, Miguel stayed grounded. His parents reminded him where he came from, and he never forgot the nights when he sang just to ease his siblings' hunger. He faced tough rounds in the competition, often doubting himself when others performed flawlessly. But every time, he remembered his village, his family, and the reason he started singing in the first place, not for fame, but to give hope. When the final round came, Miguel stood on the grandest stage of his life. Dressed in a suit gifted by a supporter, with lights shining down on him, he sang as if the whole world was listening. His song wasn't just for the judges or the cameras, it was for the boy who once sang barefoot under the stars, for the father who braved the waves, for the mother who endured long days in the market, and for the siblings who believed in him. The hall erupted once again. And though Miguel didn't win the top prize, he won something far greater, the love of millions and the proof that dreams are never too far for those who refuse to give up. Years later, Miguel used his success not to build mansions or buy luxuries, but to build a small music school in his village, giving other children the chance to chase their own dreams. He wanted them to know that poverty was not the end, but only the beginning of a story waiting to be told. And so, the boy who once sang barefoot in the dark became a light for others, his voice echoing far beyond the stage, reminding the world that even the smallest voices can shake the world when they sing from the heart. When Miguel returned to his village after that life-changing audition, it felt as if the entire community had won alongside him. Children ran barefoot through the narrow paths, shouting his name. Old women wiped their eyes, saying they had never felt so proud of one of their own. His father, usually a man of few words, embraced him tightly and whispered, "You carried all of us on that stage." His mother, still stunned, cooked a feast with whatever little they had, neighbors bringing rice, fish, and fruit to share in celebration. But beneath the joy, Miguel faced a new weight. Fame was not easy. Overnight, people he had never met spoke his name. Some praised him as a gift to the world, others mocked him, calling him just a charity case. Even at his young age, Miguel learned how cruel words could sting. But instead of breaking, he let them sharpen his determination. School was another challenge. Some classmates treated him differently, no longer seeing him as the boy who once shared lunch with them, but as someone above or apart. Teachers often asked him to sing during flag ceremonies, and while he did so with humility, it reminded him that his life would never be ordinary again. As the competition moved into the next round, the pressure grew heavier. He had never taken formal singing lessons, unlike other contestants who trained with vocal coaches. During rehearsals, Miguel felt small again, intimidated by the polished performances of others. He stayed up late at night, sitting on his bed in the cramped apartment provided for contestants, whispering songs into the darkness so as not to disturb his roommates. His voice cracked, his throat grew sore, but he kept pushing, believing that effort could bridge the gap between him and the rest. There were moments he wanted to give up. Once, after a particularly harsh comment from a judge who said, "You are talented, but raw. You need more control," Miguel ran backstage, tears burning in his eyes. He felt unworthy. But then, he remembered his mother's sacrifices, the vegetables she carried in the hot sun, the coins she counted late at night. He remembered his father's rough, sunburned hands and the times he went to bed hungry so his children could eat. And so, Miguel dried his tears and walked back on stage, determined to keep going. As weeks passed, Miguel grew not only as a singer but as a person. He formed friendships with other contestants, many of whom came from privileged backgrounds but admired his humility and courage. One girl lent him her spare shoes when his old pair tore during practice. A vocal coach, touched by his story, offered to guide him for free, teaching him breathing techniques and stage presence. These small acts of kindness shaped Miguel's journey, showing him that even in a world of competition, compassion could shine through. By the semi-finals, Miguel had become a favorite among viewers. His performances were no longer just about hitting notes, they were about telling stories. He sang about love, about loss, about dreams too fragile to hold yet too powerful to let go. And every time, audiences cried, applauded, and stood to their feet, because in Miguel, they saw not just a singer, but a reflection of their own struggles and hopes. The night of the finals arrived. The arena was packed, cameras flashing, lights blinding. Miguel stood backstage, his heart pounding. He held the rosary his mother had given him, whispering a prayer. He thought of his siblings at home, huddled around the television, waiting to see him shine. He thought of his father, probably sitting silently in the corner, holding back tears he would never show. And then, when his name was called, Miguel walked onto the stage, no longer the scared boy who once clutched the microphone with trembling hands, but a young man ready to give the world his soul. The music began. Miguel closed his eyes and sang as if his life depended on it. His voice soared, cracked, healed, and soared again. He poured into that song every hunger he had felt, every tear he had shed, every dream he had dared to dream. By the end, there was not a dry eye in the hall. Though Miguel didn't win the grand title, he won something more enduring, the love and respect of millions. Record labels offered contracts, schools invited him to sing, and most importantly, his family's life changed. No longer did his father need to risk the waves every day. No longer did his mother need to strain under the sun. Miguel made sure his siblings could go to school without worry. But perhaps his greatest achievement was years later, when he built a small music academy in his village. Children who once sang shyly by the riverside now had instruments to play, microphones to hold, and dreams to chase. Miguel often sat with them, not as a famous singer, but as a kuya, an older brother, reminding them, "I was once like you. Don't stop dreaming. Don't stop singing." And so, the poor Filipino boy who once sang barefoot under the stars became a voice that echoed across the world, not because he had the loudest voice, but because he had the truest heart.